"We don't need old men like you dragging us down," she said, flipping her hair as if dismissing me were some effortless performance. "My name is Stanley Rowe. I'm 59 years old and had spent the last 18 years running operations at Harper Machinery in Indianapolis, Indiana, a company that for decades had been a backbone for half the factories in the Midwest. I wasn't the kind of man to raise his voice or demand attention in meetings. My contribution was quieter, more methodical, the steady hand that ensured machines kept humming and schedules kept lining up. I just smiled at Vanessa's comment, a thin trace of sarcasm hiding years of disbelief, nodded once, and walked out of her office. The hallways felt narrower somehow as I passed the younger employees, most of whom I'd trained from their first day as wide-eyed interns, now grown men and women carrying families in their arms and in their hearts. None of them said a word as I packed up almost 2 decades of my life into a cardboard box, a small, sad vessel holding the tokens of a lifetime of work, framed certificates, dusty trophies, tools with engraved handles, all reminders of effort and loyalty. They were memories that had taken years to cultivate and now were being reduced to cardboard and tape. Charles Harper had built the company from scratch 43 years ago, starting with a single lathe in his garage. Over decades, he had turned it into a $30 million business through sheer grit, discipline, and a reputation for reliable machinery. When I first joined him, he had been a stern but fair man. His handshake firm, eyes unwavering. He'd looked at me one afternoon and said, "Stanley, I trust you not to cut corners." He meant it then. Vanessa, now 28, with a freshly minted business degree and 2 years spent in Miami, seemed convinced that everything built before her arrival was outdated and inefficient. She spoke of modernization and innovation, but in reality, it was a veil for wiping the slate clean for anyone who remembered how things ran before spreadsheets replaced practical sense. As I carried that pathetic little box to my truck, I felt calm, a strange, quiet energy enveloping me. What Vanessa didn't know, what she hadn't even glanced at, was my employment contract, a document Charles had insisted on, one that ensured loyalty could never be exploited, a clause guaranteeing a full year's salary as severance if I were terminated without cause. I set the box on the passenger seat and let my hands rest on the steering wheel. The production floor stretched out through the windshield. Machines I had maintained, people I had trained, systems I had implemented, all ready to feel the absence of someone who knew their rhythms deeply. I didn't slam the door or roar out of the lot. I turned the key, slid into drive, and headed home to call Harold Preston, a lawyer friend who had always relished the opportunity to tackle a corporate case with righteous fury. I had never needed drama in my life. Married 29 years to my wife Linda before cancer stole her 4 years ago, raised 2 remarkable children, a son in Denver working in engineering and a daughter teaching 3rd grade in Cleveland. I had built my life around consistency, reliability, and steady persistence, the very principles I had brought to Harper Machinery. Charles Harper had been more than a boss. He had been a father figure in ways my own absent father never could. I was 11 when he disappeared, leaving my mother to raise 3 boys on a secretary's salary. Charles had taken a chance on me at 41 after a layoff from a dying automotive plant with nothing but hands-on experience and a community college degree in mechanical engineering. He had once told me, "Credentials don't build machines. Men with skill and sense do," and he meant it. Within 2 years, I was running operations. We weren't friends in the casual sense of drinks after work or fishing on weekends, but there was respect there, an unspoken bond of understanding and mutual reliance. When Linda fell ill, it was Charles who had rearranged schedules without my asking, ensuring I could take her to every treatment. Family first, Stanley. The first warning signs had appeared a year ago when Vanessa started showing up at meetings fresh from business school, portfolio in hand, trailing perfume and expensive confidence, spouting synergy, disruption, and cost-cutting initiatives. I'd watch Charles wince at her ideas, projects that would have gutted quality control or outsourced critical components we'd always crafted in-house, but he never contradicted her publicly, quietly correcting things. After the meeting, "She needs to learn, Stanley," he said, leaning on my office doorframe. "Some lessons can't be learned in classrooms." The second warning had been Charles announcing his retirement 3 months ago. Hard issues, he claimed, though I suspected Vanessa's pressure had finally worn him down. He handed me the new organizational chart with Vanessa's name at the top and looked defeated. I made her promise to preserve the core team, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The experience you all bring is what makes this place work. I just nodded, but something tightened in my gut the way he avoided eye contact, like he already knew what was coming, how he dreaded it, and yet couldn't stop it. Vanessa had never met a machine she didn't think could be made obsolete, or a process she couldn't theorize into inefficiency. Her education was pristine, her manners sharp, her confidence almost surgical, yet it was detached from the living pulse of a factory floor, from the hours of sweat and hum of engines and belts, from people whose hands bore knowledge that no degree could teach. As I walked toward the exit with my cardboard box, memories fluttering in the wind through the open windows of the building, I saw the younger staff peeking at me like frightened children or guilty spectators. I remembered each face, a silent testimony to my mentorship and care, and I wondered how long it would take for operations to stumble without the guide that had navigated them for 18 years. My old leather shoes echoed on the linoleum floor, a rhythm that had once signaled steady leadership, now marking the passage of a career ended not by failing skills but by ambition untempered by history. Vanessa waved once from her office without realizing that this small gesture carried no meaning. I had nothing left to prove to anyone at Harper Machinery, yet everything to claim a principle long overlooked. The clause in my contract was my leverage, not vindictiveness. I had devoted the better part of my adult life to the growth of a company that trusted me implicitly, and now it was time for the company to honor that trust. As I drove past the familiar red brick facade, the sun catching the dust motes like tiny stars in the air, I thought about Charles, about the faith he had placed in me, the long nights in the shop alone adjusting machines that seemed to have a mind of their own, the production meetings where we had solved impossible schedules, and the countless times I had taken a bullet for a design flaw or miscalculation so that the company's reputation remained intact. Vanessa could have knowledge, but knowledge, alone, without context, without understanding, without instinct, is just noise, and spreadsheets aren't human intuition. I arrived home, parking the truck in the driveway, hands still gripping the steering wheel as if steadying myself for the storm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was calculating the righteous way to enforce respect. I called Harold and explained the termination details over the hum of my old answering machine, my voice calm, deliberate, measured, outlining the clause that now became my shield, the years of experience, the knowledge, the hands-on understanding of every bolt, every belt, every lathe. Every person would now translate into leverage, not vengeance. The law would enforce what the company had tried to erase. I thought of Linda, her soft smile, the way she used to say that I was more patient than anyone else she had ever met. And I vowed that her memory would be honored not with bitterness but with strategy and principle. I wasn't just a man out of a job. I was the guardian of institutional memory and integrity, and Harper Machinery would pay the price for dismissing that unknowingly foolish and completely ignorant. Harold listened quietly as I outlined Vanessa's actions and the clause in my contract. He chuckled once, a dry sound of satisfaction, before saying, "Stanley, this is exactly the kind of case I live for. Corporate overreach, sloppy arrogance. They think experience is obsolete until it costs them a fortune." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of nearly 2 decades settle in my shoulders, and realized that I had never needed a dramatic showdown to command respect. Before, my career had always been built on competence, discretion, and reliability. Now, it was about protecting what I had helped build, protecting the people who had relied on my guidance for years. I thought of the production floor, the machines, that word like living beasts responding to human hands and instincts, not algorithms and meetings. I remembered the time a conveyor belt had threatened to jam during a peak shipment week, and I had stayed through the night, tightening every bolt, recalibrating every sensor, until the line ran smoother than ever. That kind of knowledge couldn't be replicated in a spreadsheet. Vanessa wouldn't understand it. She couldn't sense the pulse of a factory with a glance. I could see it in her eyes at meetings, the way she expected magic from papers and presentations, and then blamed people when the impossible happened. I started making calls to former employees, colleagues who had moved on to other companies, quietly gathering a network of references, not for revenge but to ensure my contributions were recognized. If anyone doubted the severity of dismissing me without cause, they'd soon feel the cost. My phone buzzed with messages from friends and past apprentices, some offering sympathy, others curiosity, but all knowing the respect I had earned wasn't just given, it had been built brick by brick over years of consistency and loyalty. I spent that evening drafting a plan, a methodical approach that ensured I wasn't reacting emotionally. Every step was deliberate, from contacting legal counsel to documenting every interaction with Vanessa, to preparing a list of the tangible and intangible ways my absence would impact the company. I thought of Charles Harper, the man who had taken a chance on me when I was adrift and unemployed. He had trusted me with the lifeblood of his company because he saw value beyond diplomas, beyond flashy resumes. He had seen diligence, expertise, and integrity, and I wasn't about to let it be discarded. I went through the company files I had maintained meticulously over the years, blueprints, invoices, maintenance logs, every note ever written on a project, every decision I had made was there, a living record of my stewardship, a silent proof that Harper Machinery's success rested on more than ideas and ambition alone. Vanessa didn't know what she was dealing with. She thought a dismissal was simple paperwork, a line on a spreadsheet, but I knew the complexity of systems she had yet to understand. I could almost imagine her panic if the machinery faltered, without the guidance of someone who had spent a lifetime learning its rhythms. The following morning, I arrived at the office, not as a defeated former employee, but as a calculated force of principle. I signed in at the security desk casually, no one suspecting the storm that had been quietly gathering behind my calm demeanor. I took a stroll through the production floor, the familiar hum of motors and belts a comforting reminder that I was still connected to what I had nurtured for years. The employees looked up from their stations and gave polite nods, many still unsure what to make of my presence, some clearly uncomfortable. I caught a few younger engineers whispering among themselves. I smiled subtly as I passed them, my presence alone a quiet reassurance and a subtle warning to those who underestimated the value of experience. I scheduled a meeting with Vanessa using the company's conference system and requested she join with the HR director. When she arrived, she wore her usual crisp suit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She seemed unaware of the tension in the air. I opened the folder in front of me, containing the employment contract, the clause Charles had insisted upon, and the documented list of projects and operations I had overseen. I spoke slowly, measuredly. Vanessa, this clause guarantees 2 years' salary if terminated without cause. It was Charles Harper's protection for me, and in essence, a recognition that experience is invaluable. She glanced at the papers, her smile faltering slightly. I continued, this isn't about anger or revenge. It's about principle and the integrity of Harper Machinery's operations. Every single system here has been touched by years of careful attention, by people who understand the machinery and the process. The human element is irreplaceable. Spreadsheets cannot replicate institutional knowledge. I could see her mind racing behind polite composure. She had thought this would be an easy dismissal, a line item removed from payroll, but suddenly the reality of what she had underestimated hit her. Subtly, I outlined the potential operational consequences of my absence and added suggestions for how the company could mitigate these issues if she insisted on pursuing this path. However, the main point was clear. I wasn't negotiating out of fear. I was asserting the protection that Charles had put in place, a safeguard for competence and loyalty. It wasn't long before Harold joined the call remotely, his calm, professional tone adding weight to every point I made. It was a reminder that legal backing wasn't just paperwork, but a shield enforcing principle. Vanessa shifted in her chair, her posture rigid, her confidence showing cracks for the first time as she realized that her impulsive dismissal had opened a door she hadn't anticipated. Through the rest of the week, I meticulously documented every interaction and followed up on email chains, reinforcing the contract terms and the severity of underestimating my value. Every response from HR was polite yet careful, the lawyers on both sides aware that this was no ordinary termination. It was a legal matter framed around principle, experience, and the legacy of a company built on trust and skill. By the end of the week, whispers had spread throughout the company, the employees watching the unfolding scenario like an unexpected lesson in consequence and corporate respect. I felt a quiet satisfaction that wasn't pride or arrogance, but a recognition that sometimes the right path isn't the easiest, it isn't the fastest or most dramatic. It's methodical, deliberate, and grounded in years of integrity. I thought of Linda again, imagining her soft smile, the way she used to encourage me to stand firm and never apologize for diligence. I wanted to honor her memory in every careful step I took in the office. Each phone call and email was deliberate proof that competence and loyalty matter, that experience cannot be dismissed lightly, and that there are costs to disregarding the past. I spent evenings revisiting old projects, studying systems I had created, and ensuring that any potential gaps were identified and addressed in a professional way, not out of spite, but to protect the legacy of the work I had built. The quiet intensity of my efforts started to ripple across the company, some younger employees finding reassurance in the stability I projected, some realizing for the first time that the foundation upon which their daily work rested wasn't as simple as it appeared. I knew that the moment of confrontation was approaching, the time when Vanessa would have to acknowledge the value she had tried to bypass. I didn't rush it. I let the process unfold naturally, letting the evidence, the documentation, and the calm clarity of my presentation speak louder than any outburst or heated exchange. I had spent my life proving that reliability, consistency, and careful observation create results. Now it was time to ensure that lesson was understood, not just by Vanessa, but by the company as a whole. My reputation had been quietly built over decades, and now I would ensure it could not be casually dismantled. Every reference to me, every project list, every procedural note became a pillar supporting the undeniable conclusion that dismissing me without cause was not a small act, but one with tangible repercussions. I could see the change in Vanessa. Gradually, her confidence tempered by awareness, her every gesture measured and cautious. She had entered the office with an assumption of control that was eroding with every calmly presented fact, every detailed explanation of potential risks and operational vulnerabilities. She had to begin to understand that experience is not something bought in classrooms or acquired into years of city life. The following Monday I arrived at Harper Machinery with a quiet confidence that came from knowing my position was unassailable. The office seemed tense, yet there was a subtle shift in the air. People who had once hesitated to meet my gaze now nodded respectfully as I passed each desk. Vanessa entered shortly after me, her steps precise, her expression carefully neutral. I gestured for her to join me in the conference room where the HR director waited, along with Harold Preston joining, remotely via video call. I laid out the documentation, the contracts, the detailed operational records, the history of every major project I had overseen, the payroll adjustments, the maintenance schedules, the manufacturing protocols, all evidence that the company's core success depended on far more than flashy ideas or trendy business models. I spoke deliberately, emphasizing facts over emotion, highlighting the risks of underestimating experience, the human cost of dismissing institutional knowledge, and the potential financial consequences if operations faltered. She listened silently, her face betraying nothing at first, but gradually subtle signs of tension crept into her posture, a hand brushing her hair, an anxious tap of the pen. I continued calmly, explaining that my intention had never been to punish her or anyone else. It was to ensure that Harper Machinery respected its own policies and the vision Charles Harper had built, a company founded on trust, competence, and reliability, not whims of inexperience. For the first time she asked a direct question. "Stanley, how do you propose we move forward?" I laid out a plan for phased knowledge transfer, for mentoring sessions with key personnel, for auditing and reviewing critical systems, and I outlined how severance could be applied without causing disruption to employees or production lines. I could see the realization settling in her eyes that this wasn't about personal animosity, it was about principle and professional respect. She had underestimated the weight of the knowledge she was attempting to dismiss, and now she had to acknowledge it. The HR director nodded at several points, quietly taking notes. Harold's calm tone over the video call reinforced every point I made, reminding the company that legal enforcement was not about vengeance but principle. Vanessa paused longer than I expected, then finally spoke. I understand the value here and I misjudged the situation. I will follow the outlined approach to ensure continuity of operations and respect for institutional knowledge." I nodded once, satisfied but not smug. The situation was resolved professionally, no dramatics, no shouting. Just the inevitable acknowledgement of principle over impulsive ambition. In the following weeks, I worked closely with Vanessa and the team, ensuring knowledge transfer and mentoring were executed meticulously. It was a period of teaching and reflection. I guided the younger staff not just in operations but in understanding the value of foresight, patience, and diligence. Slowly the tension dissolved, replaced by a renewed sense of collaboration. The company learned a vital lesson about respecting experience and balancing innovation with institutional wisdom. I returned home each evening to quiet reflection, the memory of Linda always present, her encouragement to stand firm echoing in my mind, the principle of integrity she had always championed guiding me through the challenge of maintaining respect and composure. I saw my children when possible, sharing meals and stories, keeping my personal life intact even as professional waters churned. I realized that my legacy was more than contracts and machinery. It was the people I had trained, the systems I had safeguarded, and the values I had demonstrated day after day that would outlive any temporary leadership misstep. I spent weekends walking through the park, revisiting old routines, and finding comfort in small moments, a cup of coffee at sunrise, a walk through familiar streets, reflecting on the life I had built and the lessons I had passed on. I thought of Charles Harper often, imagining him watching with approval from some quiet corner, reminding me that loyalty, diligence, and principle carry weight beyond any single dismissal or corporate drama. I understood fully that respect is earned through consistency, proven in action, reinforced through integrity, and that no degree, no resume, no flash of confidence could replace the quiet power of experience and insight. Over time, Vanessa adjusted her approach gradually, seeking advice, consulting me before major changes, learning that innovation without guidance is fragile while experience without recognition is wasted. We developed a working rhythm, a balance between her theoretical knowledge and my practical insight. The company stabilized, operations improved productivity, and maintained the high-quality standards that had made it a leader in industrial equipment manufacturing. My presence at Harper Machinery remained respected, not as a relic of the past but as a cornerstone ensuring continuity and mentoring, a bridge between history and progress. I received occasional calls from employees expressing gratitude, quietly, acknowledging that my guidance and persistence had preserved not just machinery and procedures but also their livelihoods and careers. The sense of satisfaction was subtle but profound, knowing that standing firm on principle protected not only myself but the company and the people within it. Reflection became a daily ritual in my home office, reviewing the week's events, considering improvements, and maintaining correspondence with Harold, ensuring all legal measures were properly executed. I realized that life is not just about recognition in the moment but about building a foundation that can withstand change and misjudgment, and that true professional integrity manifests in calm, deliberate action rather than reactive emotion. I wrote letters to Charles in my mind, thanking him for trust, mentorship, and foresight, knowing that his decision to secure my position decades earlier had allowed me to maintain dignity and uphold the values he instilled. We sometimes underestimate the quiet power of principle, the long-term impact of steady persistence, and the necessity of honoring the human element in any organization. My final reflection was that while younger leaders will bring energy and ideas, it is the synergy with seasoned experience that creates sustainable success. Vanessa eventually expressed genuine appreciation, acknowledging that my knowledge and guidance had prevented costly mistakes and strengthened the company culture. I listened, nodded, and smiled without ego. The lesson had been communicated effectively and respectfully. The employees began to exhibit a renewed sense of confidence. They understood the balance of theory and experience and the importance of mentorship in ensuring the company's continued success. My life outside of work flourished too. My children's successes, memories of Linda, and personal projects all created a harmony that reinforced my sense of purpose and achievement. Standing at the intersection of past diligence and future growth, I felt a quiet triumph, not of ego or vengeance but of principle upheld and legacy preserved. The days passed into months and Harper Machinery thrived under this balanced approach, the corporate environment now respectful of experience while embracing innovation. I continued to mentor, guide, and quietly monitor operations, ensuring that the knowledge and integrity of past decades remained firmly embedded in every aspect of the company. My personal journey was complete in a professional sense, not with dramatic gestures or public declarations, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that steadfast principle, careful preparation, and integrity had preserved not only a career, but the heart and soul of a company built with decades of sweat, respect, and human effort. I realized finally that true success is not measured by applause or recognition, but by the enduring impact of one's actions and the respect earned, quietly and consistently over a lifetime of dedication.